Welcome everybody. Again, my name is Honna Veerkamp. I'm the Creative Experience Resource Specialist at St. Louis Public Library. Today we are doing our second in a 5-part seminar on podcasting, and so we will be going over interviewing and recording today. And this is a monthly series that goes through the whole process of podcasting from the beginning to the end. So our first seminar that we did last month was over podcast idea development. That is available on our YouTube channel, and the other ones are coming up. So check out our webpage on the St. Louis Public Library homepage. Look for Creative Experience in the footer, and we have all of our programs listed there. The link will be in resources at the end of this program as well. And I will share this slideshow with everyone who is attending today or who signed up on the wait list. If you're watching this later by YouTube and you would like this PowerPoint as well, just email it us at the address at the end of the program, and we'll be happy to send it to you. So last time we talked about idea development, and we went over some of the basics that it takes to create a podcast. And I want to go ahead and do a quick recap of that too. So sorry about that. So just an overview. Podcasts generally start with developing an idea and then taking it from there, either clear, well-edited interviews, or as someone was mentioning, they don't even necessarily have to be interviews. It could just be monologues that someone is speaking. Sometimes there's just creative sound design, whatever you want to do, but those are usually edited using software like we have at Creative Experience, such as Adobe Audition, Pro Tools, Audacity, or some of the options. We're going to be getting more into to editing next time, but that's kind of the next step. After that is done, then the file is exported as an MP3 and saved with metadata that has the information about the name of the podcast and the title and that sort of thing. And then it's uploaded to a hosting site. And so we're going to be talking also about hosting sites and distribution and promotion later in the podcast seminar as well. But a hosting site is where your actual file is stored. And so there are a lot of different options ranging from free to $5 to $10, $15 a month, depending on the bandwidth, depending on some different parameters of what they offer. But most of them offer an RSS feed for you. That stands for really simple syndication. But basically what that is it sets up a feed that points to the file that they're hosting for you, and then different directories can pick it up. So the directories are like Apple Podcasts, Google Play, that type of thing, that receive the RSS feed and publish the content. And the nice thing is that once you sign up for these, you don't have to send them your new podcast every week or whenever you put it out. Once you have your hosting site that creates this RSS feed for you, it automatically gets pushed out to all of the different directories. And that's where people download and listen to the podcasts from their devices. So we'll talk more about some of the different options for those and some of the best practices and things to consider when you're making your decision in an upcoming seminar. So for today, we want to talk about different options for recording. And so we're going to talk about recording at the library, recording at home, and then best practices for remote recording. So at St. Louis Public Library, this presentation is coming from Creative Experience. As I mentioned, Creative Experience is a digital maker space. We are located in Central Library, and we have a new location in Bar Library as well. Both of these locations have recording rooms, which have sound isolation. We're looking at a picture of the one at Central. They have computers with digital software, including Pro Tools, Adobe Audition, and Audacity, that are great for recording and editing your recording and editing your podcast. We also have workstations outside of the recording room at Central that we call our pods, which also have microphones, but they don't have that sound isolation. So you can record there, but you will have better sound quality if you make an appointment and record in the recording room. But those locations and also the computers at bars are great for editing your podcasts. So those are options when you're recording at the library. Normally we do recording room orientations for anyone that wants to learn about using that equipment. And normally that would be something that we do in person. I just recorded a virtual recording room orientation that is available on our YouTube channel and on the homepage of the library right now. And I'll also link to that in the resources. So if you want to learn how to use the recording room, but are intimidated about getting started using the equipment, it takes you through from the beginning to the end of how to sit down. I use Pro Tools in that demo, but you could use whichever software you want. We talk about how to use the hardware and software to get good sound levels, because that's the most important thing in recording, is getting the sound levels good. And so that tutorial is specific to our recording rooms and particular to Central, although I talk about the slight differences at the bar location. But some of the things that I talk about in there are relative, even if you're doing it at home. So just talking about how to get good sound, and some of the kinds of equipment we have at the library may be things you would consider if you were trying to set up a home studio as well. So I'd encourage you to check that out. If you decide that you want to record at home, right now I'm just talking about using what we have at our disposal, because we're in a situation where some people may have equipment, some people we're just making do with what we can in this situation. And so you can get fairly decent quality recordings on a smartphone. You're not going to get as good of quality it doesn't have as good of quality of a microphone as some of the microphones that you could attach to your computer or using a field recorder, but you can get pretty decent recordings. So some general things to think about with whatever equipment you're using is that you want to try to find a fairly quiet place without a lot of echoes. And so ideally you would prefer a room that has carpeting or has a couch or a bed or soft coverings, and it isn't just a big empty room with hard floors and hard walls, because the sound will echo and bounce off of those walls and you'll hear it more. So a lot of times people that are recording podcasts at home, if they're just recording their own parts, will sit in their closet and record. That might not be where you want to do an interview, unless it's somebody that you want to hang out in your closet with, but it's a good place to record your own vocal tracks. And the reason why is because it has all those soft things around it. But you can record just fine in a living room or something like that. Just be aware of trying to find a place that the sound doesn't bounce a lot. You're going to also want to think about air conditioning and heating sounds, because they can come up more than you realize. Loud refrigerators even. Just be aware of those kind of things.
Where are you recording from now? Is that a background, or are you?
That's a background. That's a virtual background. So that is the background of the recording room at Central. I'm actually at my home, and I have stuff in here. It's definitely not empty, but it's not, I have wood floors and wood walls, and I have a fan on. So it's not the ideal situation right now, but it's not too bad. And I'm also just using a little earbuds with a mic right now. So this isn't the best mic ever, but
you sound really clear though.
Thanks. Yeah. And I'm going to talk next about remote recording and Zoom. We've been pretty happy with Zoom for remote recordings, better than some of the other options. So a couple of other things that I wanted to point out about recording at home, and these notes are in the speaker notes on the slideshow that will be shared with you afterwards. So if you don't remember the details, wherever you are, record some of what we call room noise, which is just that even if you think it's quiet, it's not totally 100% quiet. So it's a good practice whenever you're doing a recording, to record 30 to 60 seconds of just quiet in quotes, because then if you need to add that you can use that to mix with other pauses. You can also use it to try to do some noise reduction if you need to, because it's easier to figure out what kind of background noises they are when it's not mixed in with your speaking. So that's just good practice generally. If you do have some kind of a field recorder that you can change the levels on, you can't usually adjust the recording levels with the smartphone. So with a smartphone, you're going to want to just put it in between the speakers. If you're setting it on a table, this goes for a smartphone or a field recorder, you may want to set it on a piece of cloth or something soft, and just be aware that anytime anybody bumps the table or anything like that, those vibrations will get picked up. But position it so that it's in the middle of the speakers. If there's one person that speaks quieter than the other, put it more close to them, because proximity affects the recording. If you have a field recorder that has built-in mics, like a little portable recorder, try to put that in the middle as much as you can too, or aim it at the person who you're interviewing. There are USB mics and things like that you can get, which are not that expensive and would probably work very well for recording one voice. They may not work as well for recording more than one voice because they're pretty directional. Although the USB mics that we have at Central and that are in the recording room have the option to record multiple people at once. So we can talk specifics about that if you're interested. But try to just either have the mic pointed at the speaker or have it in the middle so it picks up both people as much as you can. If you are using a field recorder and that has levels that you can set and that allows you to set the format, you're going to want to set the sample rate to 44.1 kilohertz and set the bit depth to either 16 or 24 bit. And so that's the standard broadcast quality for any kind of radio, podcasts, music, anything like that. If you're recording on your phone, or if we're recording on Zoom, we don't have the option to make those setting adjustments. But if you can, that's what you're going to want to do. If you can set the levels, if you see a meter that says how loud things are, you can look for a range of -16 to -12 dB, but also be listening so that it's not getting too noisy. You want it to be as loud as you can without getting too noisy, and you don't want it to get distorted. So you never want the meters, if you have the option to see them, to get above -0 dB. And this, again, these are in my notes that you'll have with you, and this is only if you have a portable recorder where you can set these things. Whatever you're doing, the best advice I would say is to do a test. So try recording in a similar situation that you want to do your interview or that you want to record yourself, and then listen back to it before you do the actual interview. And that way you can make adjustments if you need to, whether you're recording on your phone, whether you're recording with a field recorder, or whether you're recording with doing remote recording. So if you do choose to do remote recording, which a lot of us are doing these days, there's a couple things to think about. One thing to know is that when you're listening to interviews on the radio or professional podcasts that are speaking with a remote guest, typically the way that those are done are using a tape sync or what's called a double ender. And so that is where they actually have a reporter so in the city that the interviewee is in, and they would go to their house or their office, bring their recording gear, and actually record their end of it there, while the host or interviewer in a different city is on the phone talking to that person and recording their end of it. So that is how you get the very cleanest sound that you may hear on the radio. But these days, with the pandemic, a lot of people are not even doing those. And so even the professional podcasts and radio shows that you're hearing, a lot of them are doing that over Zoom these days, or other video chats. But we have found that Zoom is giving us the best quality recording of the ones that I have tried. And there is an option that I really like in Zoom that you can do if you have the desktop version of Zoom downloaded. I don't know that you can do this just in the browser or on your phone, but you have to be logged in. It can be a free account, but before you do the meetings, you go into the Zoom client, which is the downloaded one. And again, these are in my notes as well, but you click on the recording tab, and then that gives you an option to enable record a separate track for each participant. And that way, when it's done, it'll send you a separate audio track for everybody that's in the recording. And that makes it a lot easier to edit so that you don't have to worry about people speaking over each other and having to cut it apart. So that's something that is a nice option with Zoom. Whatever you're using when you're recording remotely, you want to use headphones so that you avoid feedback. You want to test the mic and speakers first, and then do a test recording before you actually do your interview if you can. You might want to experiment with different mics that you have available, whether it is the built-in mic in your laptop or whether it's earbuds like I'm using, or if you have a USB mic, try them out and just see what the different options sound the best. If you do have a wired connection, a DSL connection, then that will make your internet and hence your recording more stable than Wi-Fi. I don't have that here, so I'm using Wi-Fi and I'm getting pretty good quality. So if you just have Wi-Fi, that's fine. But if you do have the ability to plug into a DSL connection, I would recommend doing that. And there is also the option to record on phones using an app. I haven't done this specifically myself. Most of them are paid apps that you would need to do, and you would need to set up the recording ahead of time before you make the call. Usually, I don't know of any that allow you to just make a call and start recording on the call. And you also need to be aware of the recording laws in different states, depending on where the person you're speaking to is and where you are. Each state has their own consent rules, and also just as a matter of ethics, it's always good to let somebody know that you are recording them and make sure that you have their consent. And then I want to also mention, I'll talk about this in the resources, but there is another resource that I wanted to share with you for remote recording. StoryCorps, which some of you may be familiar with, is a nonprofit organization that records oral histories of people and allows people to record oral histories with each other and archives them in the Library of Congress. And they have in-person booths that travel around the country and some permanent ones. But during COVID, they have come up with an online application that allows you to sign up and record right within the web browser to record people. And I haven't used it myself, but it looks really promising, and I like StoryCorps a lot. And they also have a great list of questions there, so it's a great free resource, and I have that at the end of my resources as well. I'm going to move on to talking about some best practices about interviewing, and then we'll actually do a little bit of practicing with interviewing.
There's some questions in the chat, sorry.
Okay, thanks. I was going to ask like this. Okay, so let me take a look at these real quick. Thank you. So, okay, what is a field recorder? A field recorder is a portable handheld recorder. So some examples might be a Zoom recorder, not to be confused with the Zoom meeting space, different brand that also happens to be called Zoom. But they typically have built-in microphones or allow you to plug in a microphone too. Costs range between $100 to a few $100s, depending on the quality of them. And the numbers, so when I say the details are in my notes, you will have access to my notes. So you're not seeing the, I'm just showing you the slideshow view, but on the PowerPoint, there are speaker notes in it too. When we email you this presentation, you will have access to those notes that I put in there too. and the sample rate and bit depth that I mentioned, those numbers are in those notes, but the sample rate that is the standard for broadcast is 44.1 kilohertz, and the bit depth that is standard is 16 bit, but 24 is often used because it is a little bit higher quality and doesn't take up a lot more space. So those are all kind of technical things, but just if you have the option to change those settings, I wanted to give you those standards so that you know to do those if you have that option. Any other questions specifically about the recording part? And we can do general questions at the end too, before or after we finish recording. But I do want to move on to the interviewing aspect, and unless there's any questions that you guys want to ask right now about this. Okay, so let's move on. Let's turn this slide. So with interviewing, I'm going to give you some general guidelines that are going to change in the situation some, but a lot of them really work with whatever situations you're in. And I know that we have a number of communications professionals with us today that probably have a lot of experience and may have other additional things to add, and feel free to add pointers in the chat if you would like to as we go. The best advice that I can give for interviews is to ask open-ended questions. And so that means to not ask questions that just end with a yes or no, because that tends to stop the conversation. You want to build rapport with the interviewee, so start with easy questions that are easy for them to talk about, and then build up to things that may be more difficult topics. I like to give interviewees a list of things to know, have an idea of what we're going to talk about, but not specific questions, for two reasons. One is that I don't like to be tied down to my specific questions, because I want to be open to having the conversation change as we go. And I also don't want them to prepare in such a way that it sounds like they're giving written answers. I find that it tends to be more conversational if they're prepared to talk about a topic, but not to answer a specific question. Along those lines, I think for me, it's good to be prepared, but not so tied to questions that I don't hear the conversation, that I can't respond with what's happening in real time. So I like to make a list of questions, at least a few questions that I know that I want to get to, and study it, and then put it away, and then just do the interview as a conversation, and have that available to pull out if I need to, but not be tied to it. Last time I mentioned a book, and I have it in my resources too, called So You Want to Start a Podcast, which is by Kristen Meinzer, and it's a book that we have at the library that's available. And some of her best advice from that is to be curious, and I really like that advice. Ask follow-up questions, keep it conversational. So if somebody says something that's really interesting, don't just move on to your next question. And at the same time, you want to, rein in the rambling. Don't let it get too out of hand, but be willing to let it go a little bit and see what happens. And then finally, just allowing some spaces of silence. And this does a couple of things. First, it allows the interviewee to have a little bit more time to think about how they want to respond, and to open up and to continue. Also, sometimes people end up talking more because silences can be uncomfortable and they want to fill the space. And so if you're not filling the space, sometimes there's more room for your interviewee to add things that they want to add. So with all that in mind, I would like to do a short exercise that we can do together that will be practicing these techniques. And this is something that I would encourage you to do on your own in the future. But for now, I was wondering if I could have volunteers that would be willing to take on the role of interviewer and interviewee for a 5-minute practice interview. And this is recorded, so it would be people that feel comfortable doing that.
I'd be happy to.
Okay, great. Which role would you prefer?
Interviewer.
Okay. All right. Patsy is going to be the interviewer. Is there anybody that would be willing to be interviewed? And we'll just ask you to talk about something that you're really comfortable talking about. So any topic. So if you were here for the last seminar, we did an exercise to develop ideas where we talked about our passion and our expertise and tried to find intersections of those two things. And so something along those lines of something that you're either passionate about or that you know a lot about that's really easy to talk about. That's what we would want to interview you about. Is there anybody that would be willing to be interviewed?
This is Jan. I'll be an interviewee.
Perfect. Okay. So then to start, Jan, can you tell us what you'd like to talk about?
Oh, wait a minute.
Just a topic that you love, maybe music, for instance, or
Sure.
one of the things that you mentioned last time about being interested in programming and early programming and women that were involved, just some type of topic that you feel comfortable that you could talk about easily.
Yeah, music is a good one. Thank you.
Okay, great. And so I'm going to ask Patsy to come up with about 5 questions that you want to ask Jan, and then also everyone else that's participating, we can also suggest questions in the chat either now or as the interview goes. Jan, can you say just a little bit more just to start about just a little nutshell about your experience and interest in music so that Patsy has something to go on?
Sure. Well, when I was a child, I was in choir throughout grade school. And then in high school, I was in the orchestra, played violin for 4 years. If I picked one up now, I wouldn't know what to do with it, but because that was a long time ago. And, off and on throughout the years, I've maintained an interest in I play guitar a little. I taught myself a little piano. But now that I'm retired, I've actually been studying music. I'm taking music theory and getting back to playing guitar and doing some piano. So
great. So cool. Patsy, does that give you enough to come up with a few questions to jot down and then have a conversational interview?
Sure, I can do it. Okay.
So why don't you just take a couple minutes and prepare yourself, and then everybody else, if you also want to think about questions that you'd like for Patsy to ask Jan, and feel free to just put them in the chat if you have ideas, and then Patsy, you're welcome to look at those too, and follow the questions that you want to ask, or also let it be conversational. And just let us know when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, so let's just take about, we'll do this for just about 5 minutes. If you want to just get started and interview Jan, that would be great.
Sure. Well, hi, Jan. This is Patsy, and I'm so delighted that you wanted to be on my show. I'm a big music fan myself. You said you were in choir in school, and you played the violin in high school. Who were your musical influences that made you want to get involved in music?
That's a really interesting question. My father was a sort of frustrated operetta singer. And Sunday mornings, he would get up before we got out of bed and got ready to go to church. He would get up and put Mario Lanza and Caruso on the stereo. and he would sing along with that. So he was one of my inspirations.
Cool, cool. What is some of your favorite kind of music
I
in,
cannot
in the
think,
whole genre?
exactly, I cannot think of music that I don't like very much. Maybe rap isn't my very favorite, but even rap, if it's melodic and has some good lyrics, I can go with it. So I'm pretty
Yeah,
eclectic.
I hear you. I hear you. You said did you self-teach yourself like guitar and piano? And how did you do that?
Yeah, that's an interesting story too. When I got out of high school, I got interested in playing guitar, and I started taking lessons with a lady who was very nice. But after 6 months of lessons, I could play My Grandfather's Clock Is Too Large for the Shelf. And I thought, this is not the direction I want to go in. So since I sang a little too, what I started doing, I just got sheet music, and I started getting a couple of books and taught myself how to play some chords, and fundamentally just started hanging out with other people who played a little guitar and self-taught myself. So
That's awesome. I actually took 2 years of guitar in grade school. Our music teacher taught it, and the only song I remember that we must have played 1,000 times was Tom Dooley. It was GD7, 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 and everybody that took it, we all felt the same way. We hated that song after we were done taking lessons. We have a caller here with a question. She said, "Have you ever had the desire to work in music professionally?"
I might have had the desire, but I don't know that I had the discipline. Also, it's the kind of field that it's very tentative as to whether or not you could make a living doing it. So I've always considered it more of a hobby.
Nothing wrong with that. I hear you. I can't sing, but I can play a little. I used to play a little guitar and piano myself. We have another question from a listener. What's your earliest memory with regard to music?
Very interesting.
And then to continue, she asks, how did you get started in the choir as a child?
I'm going to go back to my my earliest memory. I'm going to have to go back to my dad singing, because he had quite a good tenor voice.
Cool.
And he used to set me up on the. He used to sing sad songs to me to make me cry. Now I know that sounds cruel, but it's one of my memories. I remember sitting on the kitchen sink while he's singing sad songs to me. Now that shouldn't have been an inspiration, but it was. As far as choir is concerned, they offered it at the school. They had, at that time, they actually did music once a week in classrooms. So we're going back a long, long way. In terms of the 50s and 60s, they actually had it as part of the curriculum. And so they would, if they thought you had a voice, they would kind of recruit you to be in the choir.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun after school. And actually, we had a very good music teacher and director, and we did some pretty good singing. So
cool. We have one last question because it's almost time to go. About the sad songs, why did they inspire you?
and I still love a sad song. I still do. I like a good cry as well as a good laugh. I'll just leave it at that. And thanks so much for your time, Betsy.
It was a pleasure having you. Have a good one.
You too.
All right. Great job, everybody. Yeah, there's some good comments in the chats. I think that I agree with the chats in here. You guys sounded very professional, did a great job. What did the people that were listening and participating in the chats, what are some of the things that stood out about how that interview went, or for you guys, Jen and Patsy? If anybody wants to say anything that you noticed about the interview, or what worked, or what you noticed about that, then either you feel free to say it out loud or put it in the chat.
I like the fact that they had open-ended questions that kind of told a story. So that attracted you to what they were saying.
I agree. I also noticed that I think that Patsy did a really good job of relating to the topic and of bringing in um, their own experience to the topic as well. And yeah, very very relaxed and natural. And there's different styles of interviews too. There's some people that interview that do that style of being very engaged and very personally relatable. Some people prefer to be a little bit more standoffish, and then there's not one that is right or wrong. It's just depending on your personality as an interviewer coming through. But I think that in this case, it worked very well because they were able to relate. And that brings me to another point that I wanted to mention. If you think that if you plan to do a lot of editing and you don't want to have your questions in it as much, that's something that you can talk about before the interview to say, hey, can you answer in open-ended questions? And then when you decide to edit, you may not have as much of the interviewer in. But in this case, I felt like the conversation worked really well with the way that they played off of each other. And somebody else is saying that too, that they connected, felt like you're eavesdropping on two friends. I agree that worked very well in this case. Any other comments or thoughts? Anything that you guys want to mention, Jan or Patsy, about how this went?
I'll just say I thought Patsy did a great job. It was very comfortable for me to respond to her questions. She came
Your answers were great. Your answers were great.
Good. Thank you. It was fun.
So great job. Thank you guys. And this hour is going by really fast. So, you know, I would encourage you to just practice this with relatives or friends and get comfortable with this part of it, and also get comfortable trying to do it on Zoom or ways that you feel comfortable recording right now. And it doesn't have to be as intimidating. And even if you end up with more content than you want, you can edit. And personally, it takes a while to edit, but I'd rather have more than less. So we will get into some of the basic editing next time. Before we move on, let's see where we're at. Oh. I want to just share some of the resources, and then we'll be able to have a little bit more questions, and I can stick around a little bit later if people have questions still to ask. So the first resource is Creative Experience. This is goes to our webpage. If you click on there, you can find the calendar of virtual events that are happening, as well as blog posts. And it's a great resource to find out about everything that's coming up and learn more about the recording room, learn more about our resources. We are in the process of updating our website, so it should be soon. To save time right now, I'm not going to open it up and go there, but please check that out. When you are on the library's website, if you go to digital content, you can also find different learning opportunities available there, including lynda.com, which is a great bank of online tutorials that you can learn either specific things you can search for, like how to use Audition or Pro Tools, or you can search for podcasting or something more general like that. And it's a resource that usually is a paid service, but you can access it for free through our library by logging in with your library card. I also have linked to Your Library Podcast, the podcast that Mary and I produce about resources, events, and people at the St. Louis Public Library. Please check that out and listen or consider subscribing. This is our YouTube channel that we're just developing. We would love it if you subscribe to that as well. And this is where you will find all of our virtual programs after they happen, including these podcasting seminars, as well as the recording room orientation that I mentioned. This is the book that I mentioned, and this is just one particular book that I happen to like because it kind of breaks down the whole process of podcasting, and it's a really easy, funny book to look at. But we also have a lot of other books on podcasting. Of course, we're a library, so check out our card catalog, and many of those are available as ebooks or audiobooks as well as print books. And then finally, this is a link to the StoryCorps StoryCorps Connect that I mentioned that you can check out later and look at those resources, including their list of questions. And finally, this is where we're at in the podcasting seminar. Next month, we'll be doing editing and mixing, talking about some basic editing and then how to add music to your podcast. The following month, we will get a little bit more involved with how to use EQ and compression and what the loudness standards are for podcasts. And then finally, in December, we'll be focusing on the hosting, distribution, and promotion. This is our contact email on this page. And again, if you're watching this later on video, feel free to email us there and ask us, and we'll be happy to send out this PowerPoint. For those of you that are here today, Mary will follow up with an email with this PowerPoint as well as a survey about the workshop. So it would be great if you could respond to that. And so we've got, we're just running out of time, but we will take a few more questions if anyone wants to ask them now that will still be included on the video. We can also stop recording if people want to ask further questions after we stop recording. And I can stick around a little bit longer. Mary, are you available to stick around a little bit after this? Yes. Okay. So if people, if anyone needs to go, I totally understand because we're at time. But if people want to stick around with a few questions, feel free. Does anybody have any questions right now that you would like to ask while the video is still being recorded? If an interviewee gives a short or one-word answer, what's a good way to draw them out? That's a great question. And that is one of the reasons why I'm really suggesting the open-ended questions. But I would probably try then to, again, kind of do what I can to ease them into the situation and make them feel more comfortable. So maybe I would ask them about something else and then let them warm up to doing that. And then kind of get back at those questions a little more. Or someone says, poke them in the eye. That's an option. Someone's asking about making money hosting a podcast. And if so, how? People do make money hosting podcasts. There's a couple different ways that they typically do it. It usually has to do with really building up your audience and building an audience to the point that you can leverage your audience for advertisers. And so the book that I recommended talks some about that. We're not going to be getting into as many specifics as that because we're really getting into just starting a podcast in this series, but it has to do with building an audience. So the bigger audience that you develop, the more that you can leverage that to potential advertisers. So ad revenue is one way that people make money from podcasts. Another thing is that some people use something like Patreon, which is kind of like a GoFundMe for artists. They ask people to become patrons to their artistic project, including a podcast, and pledge anywhere from maybe $1 per month on up, but it can be very small amounts. But if you get a number of people that are willing to put in $1 or $5 every month, and sometimes you offer them, special content or promotions or things like that, that's a way that people make money off of it. And then the other way that people make money is by partnering with larger organizations that are kind of umbrellas that have a lot of promotion, or else getting a job as an employee producing a podcast for a larger venue. So those are the typical ways that I know that people make money. Any other questions? All right, so let's go ahead and stop recording and we'll stick.